Hi everyone, welcome back to Minkyu And Shiyoon, our animation podcast. What's today's date? Today is
September 28th,
September
and I
28th.
believe this is going to be the fifth episode, but
Wow.
we don't know the order of what's going to be released.
Right.
So how have you been, Shun? Anything? How's
I
your general state of mind?
I've been good. Well on your recommendation, I just saw that TED Talk on creativity from the author of Eat. I think it was Eat,
Pray
Pray,
Love?
Love.
Yeah, Elizabeth Gilbert. Yeah.
Yeah, and I thought I really enjoyed that, and I love that part where she was talking about a poet, and basically it was the spirit of creativity that was passing through her, and she caught it by the foot, and then she pulled it
Pulls it
back
back in.
into her
Yeah.
body, and so one hand is pulling the spirit back into her body, and the other hand is writing down the poetry backwards.
So if I'm remembering correctly, it's like when she's talking a lot about like how for that poet or for many writers, it's like
Right.
the good sentence or the idea hits you, and when
Right.
you don't write it down at that moment,
Right.
you can't remember what it was later on when you're actually trying to sit down and work. So I think was that what she was
Yeah,
talking about,
yeah.
where it's like when you get hit by inspiration,
Yes.
your duty as a writer or an artist is to
Right.
run to a piece of paper and
Right.
like write it down as fast as possible. And I think with that example, she was talking about that poet who
Yes.
was maybe working at a garden or something,
Right.
and then she got like a
She
hit.
felt the spirit going over the hill and
Wow.
coming towards that, and she knew that if she didn't write it down, then it would go to some other artist. So
I love that way of talking about creativity.
So that was, yeah, I thought that was really interesting. How about you, Mingy? How are you doing?
Good, good. Recently I started listening to Virginia Woolf's Mrs. Dalloway
Ah,
on audiobook because I recently was ashamed that I've never read any of her works, and right now I'm reading about like 5 different books, so I was like, I can't just add another book, but in an audiobook format maybe.
yeah,
And with audiobooks, it's rare that you come across a narrator that you really like,
right.
because a lot of times you'll really like the sound of you'll really like the description of a book, and then when you hear the preview for the audiobook, you're like, oh no, this is not the voice that I'm picturing with this, you
It's a
know.
lot of commitment too, because you're listening to it like more than 3 hours.
Of
Like,
course, yeah, it's like 7 to 20 hours
yeah.
depending on what book. And but this one, Annette Bening, the
Oh,
great actress Annette Bening, narrates it, and it's just splendid. It's
huh.
just so spectacular, and it's really interesting because it's almost funny and ironic because, like, you know, Virginia Woolf was British,
Mm,
so you'd think her novel should be narrated in a British accent or by a British person,
right.
but Annette Bening, she just narrates it in the most
Huh.
unapologetic American accent, and it's marvelous. Like,
Huh.
she does it in a way where every sentence just hits you so beautifully, and I'm learning that that's kind of like Virginia Woolf's writing a little bit.
Mm,
Just examining it from the surface, it's just like sentence after sentence. It's just dazzling writing. You know,
mm,
that I think that's kind of the writer she is, and the way Annette Bening translates it. It's transportive.
mm.
I know I'm talking it up a lot, but I really stand behind this, and yeah, so I've been really into that.
Did she has some kind of connection with
I
Calarts,
think she
right?
did. Yeah. And I want to ask our guest that, who is waiting for us in the corner in a little bit. And speaking of our guests, so in terms of our listener questions, by far um, the question that we get the most is about should I go to art school, or should I explore alternative routes? What are the pros and cons for that? Um, Kind of asking us to dive into those topics. And so we thought, yeah, this sounds like a subject matter that
We can really
deser-
delve deep into just
yeah, and kind of wanting to give it the due time it deserves,
right.
you know, instead of just like
Instead
just
of a Twitter thing, where
instead
it's
of a
like,
Twitter like thread, or just even just doing like a weird side by side comparison. Like, no,
right.
let's just like dive into each one and explore that area. And um, we thought that it would probably be most appropriate to start from what our experience was, which,
Right.
you know, we went to CalArts, which would classify as an art school,
Right.
And so today for our guest, we have the honor of having the director of the character animation program from Calarts here, and her name is Maija Burnett.
Thank you so much.
Hello, Maija. Thank you so much for being on.
Yay.
Thank you for having me. It's a huge, huge honor.
Oh no, the honor is all ours. Yeah. So how are you these days, Maija?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Yeah, we imagine, well, at least I imagine, I should speak for myself, that it's probably really busy over there because didn't the semester just start like 2 or 3 weeks ago?
We just finished the 3rd week.
How does that feel?
I imagine it's sort of like, you take a bag full of just items, you throw it up in the air, and then you let it all land. And that's sort of what the start of the term feels like, just this kind of sort of riot.
Isn't there a term for that? Like ordered chaos or
yes,
chaotic order or whatever? Yeah, I'm blanking on the term, but brings me back to when I first started. And I just want to, corroborate the timelines a little bit. So was that the first year you started? Was when I was, I think, a 3rd year?
I think so, yeah.
Which year was that, if you don't mind me saying?
Started in January of 2007.
Oh, 2007.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah,
Winter.
I would have been a 2nd year or 3rd year, maybe, right? Because I started in the fall of 2005.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. second year, yeah. Our listeners they'll do the math. We're not mathematicians, you guys. Yeah. So just to go over the timelines a little bit. So when I was a freshman, Shiyoon, you were a 4th year, right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
So I started in 2001, and then I went for 5 years. Well, I took a year off.
5 years?
I took a year off in the middle of that, so it felt like 5 years.
I remember that was such a good time. Not the year that you took off, but just my first year.
That was the best.
My first year, and just being introduced to this incredible group of artists. And I remember the 4th years, you guys were just on such a high level to me, just shining in the clouds. Wow, they have 3 years of experience here. That's incredible. They must know everything.
Well, that's the thing. It's with art school, it was in my high school, I was the only one weird artsy one that's kind of into drawing.
Yeah.
And then you go to the school and everyone's really talented. Everyone's got their own way of doing things, and I think that was really special. I took it wow.
Yeah, I know. It's almost unbearably exciting.
Right.
And that's the feeling that colored my entire first year. And also in my first year was, of course, Jihyun, your wife,
yes.
sitting right here. She was in my first year, and also Andy, our producer. We were all in the same year. I don't know if we all graduated in the same year, though, which is also, Andy's shaking his head no. So Jihyun saying she graduated in 2010. I graduated 2009.
Right.
So Andy and Shiyoon, you guys graduated together. So yeah, and obviously Shiyoon, you graduated a year later than the other students that you started with. So
it was 2006. I think.
Yeah. So that happens too, which is really interesting.
I think what's great with Calarts is they're even though everyone's coming from different places, but there's a common kind of experience maybe that people go through. But I wonder, how is it like now?
So it's, well, first of all, they're all incredible artists, and it is such a joy to see the work that they do, whether seeing it online, in the hallways, in their films. I would say that there's definitely a sort of leaning towards the personal, and or just, taking very personal experiences and then broadening those out into film concepts and film ideas. But that's also infusing the, 2D illustrations that they might make, or the gesture drawings that they do as well. I think there's just a sort of heavy leaning towards the personal. I think because, in this day and age with digital media, we have such access to so many different forms of art making around the world, that they're very influenced by that. So
it's crazy.
Yeah, it's amazing. So I don't see necessarily, one specific influence, but it's they kind of pull from all these different areas and form something unique unto themselves, and then they influence each other as well. So it's really interesting to see that. There's definitely a fearlessness when it comes to creating the work.
That's so exciting.
You know, but then they also have a lot more that they have to contend with. You know, when you guys were students, there wasn't social media, or maybe it was just the early advent of it.
Thank
now,
God.
Of course, right? Now it's
honestly.
it's such a massive element of everyday life.
Wow.
And so they already come in having negotiated themselves as artists in an online space. And then they continue to do so as they're in school. And of course, with that comes great feedback, but also trolls and
all the
people,
other bad stuff.
just everything.
Exactly.
You know,
Yeah.
so they've become very savvy with dealing with that.
That's good, because it's like they're coming in at such a young, impressionable age that, you know, those things might matter a lot more. That those things might have a lot more gravity towards them. That it's like, but in a way, I guess it's also good that they are learning those lessons early on and being savvy with that early on, so they don't make the kind of mistakes that I would have probably made when I was 17. So I imagine that something like VR or AR you can see as being like a big component of the animated industry in the future. Is that how you feel, or is it still kind of big but still kind of within that niche area, just because, like you said, like, what is the accessibility for that? And I'm even imagining, and we can get into this a little bit later, but like if a VR film gets into the producer show, I'm sure you can cut like a theatrical version of it, but would that mean then having like a little VR station at the producer show outside the screen? I know Maia's like rubbing her forehead like, oh my gosh, that's so, totally get it. But like,
I'm like, just the logistics, hard enough to put on the show, let alone.
Exactly.
No, but you're right. And actually, so our students, you know, in the incredible way that they've been pushing these boundaries already for quite some time. So at last year's open show, it actually kicked off with one of our students who goes by Animate online. Kicked it off with a VR performance that also involved music and images.
Wow.
So that kicked off the open show. That definitely was a challenge to do, but I'm really glad that it happened. And then also the year, I think before, I think it was in 2018, Gabby Capilli, who graduated then, you may have been there, but her film wasn't VR, wasn't AR, but she interacted with her film from the stage.
With the dinosaur?
With the dinosaur, yeah.
So good.
So that was a huge challenge from a technical standpoint, and we were concerned the audience was going to wonder what the heck was happening when she came running down the
It was
aisle.
perfect, but I think that was part of the performance, right?
Yeah.
Like actively making the audience wonder, what is this? Because I actually was lucky enough to catch that performance on the open show as well. And I remember, you were there too, right? Yeah, we were all there, because we still go to the open show from time to time, you guys. We want that fresh inspiration. But yeah, I remember being like, oh no, like just really being right there at the edge of my seat with going through all the emotions that she's going through. And man, just thinking about all these fresh voices, like you just said, coming in with brand new, innovative perspective is so exciting. Just to backtrack on our time a little bit together, Maija.
Sure.
So it sounds like, yeah, when I was a second year, third year, math a little foggy.
Third, yeah.
So that's the first year you actually started teaching at Calarts.
Yes.
And I had the privilege and honor to becoming one of your first students, I'm going to say, in this podcast. And if I'm remembering correctly, well, I know that you were an animation critical studies teacher. And if I'm remembering correctly, I think I took all of your classes, every single, and at that time you taught 3 classes, and they were animation in the body, animation and transgression, and superhero theory. Was that?
Superheroes inside the Batcave.
Yes, perfect. And obviously we can delve into each one of those classes, and I want to circle back on some of them, but by far, from my memory, my favorite class that you taught was animation and transgression. And I actually have, since you've so kindly sent us the syllabus in front of me, the syllabus from fall 2007 of this class that I took. And would you mind if I read the class description a little bit? Because I just think it's so great. And are you embarrassed? Like we're visiting memory lane. We can edit all of this out if you feel comfortable about it. But it was a class that did really mean a lot to me. And it's interesting because, first of all, before going into this, should we talk about what critical studies is? Because I think for a lot of people who've never been to art school, they don't they might not really know what critical studies is. So would you be able to explain that for us?
Absolutely, yeah. So critical studies is the general education component of the education that Calarts provides. They call it critical studies, and so it's the bachelor of the Bachelor of Fine Arts.
I didn't even. I never even knew that. Wow.
Otherwise, it's just a fine arts. No, but so it confers that. I believe it's 40% of the curriculum, so it's actually a big chunk of it. And Calarts, you know, more so than other schools I've seen, is really innovative as far as the types of critical studies classes that they offer. So isn't necessarily standard types of courses that are offered, but the faculty really, come from a variety of backgrounds and are very attuned to the environment at Calarts and come up with really innovative ideas. So, and when I was doing this, I was an adjunct, so part-time teacher, and then it was about 2.5 years later that I joined the character animation program. So,
I see.
Yeah.
So, in contrast to, I don't know what you would call this, but the non-critical studies classes.
Right.
So those would be more like life drawing,
Yes.
or like hand-drawn animation class or storyboarding class. Those would be the type of classes that are the non-critical study classes that you take.
Yeah.
But outside of that, and critical studies isn't just limited to animation, it's really this kind of cross-medium, cross-sectional kind of theorizing.
When I think about like my memory of Calarts, which is kind of hazy, but like the critical studies classes was a huge, I think, give a big impression on me, and just even the way I think and like my taste, things that I like, and I think those are things that maybe like it's like a huge part of your education. If
for sure,
like,
yeah, and I can already hear my like 18-year-old self saying like, how could you say this, Minkyu, about what I'm about to say? But it's like, because at that time when I was at school, I hated critical studies, right? Like, and it's a pretty common sentiment among students, right? Like, they just want to go to the animation classes and they just want to draw, and then it's like, oh, to graduate, I have to take a freaking class on like world cinema, or I don't know, like, or
I took a
Los
class
Angeles
on
and the city.
Something about I'm not even saying it right, but how it's impossible to write history.
Oh,
and
wow.
And at that time, I was like, oh, that's kind of a crazy class.
Yeah.
Just
like, why do I need this class? But it is true, exactly like what you said.
But it's so relevant now. I mean, like, it makes me question, like, in a good way, like, whatever's on the news, and just like, well, like, it makes you really question things. And I think that's part of the Calarts, or my Calarts experience, was to like,
it's the enriching part of the Calarts experience, right? And it's like, it is so funny. It's exactly like you said. The strongest memories that I have from Calarts are actually from critical studies classes. Right. Like the films that we saw in like Film Today, for example.
I took jazz history. That was by a jazz musician.
That's crazy. Yeah, I took Psychology 101, which was just mind-opening. And it's like, yeah, when I look back at Calarts, and yes, at the time, did I honestly hate taking those classes? Yes, because it's like at the end you have to write like a 17-page paper and so much homework, reading, but it is crazy how like, no, I remember like the strange video from some country that I can't even pronounce that they showed, that I was like,
what was
wow.
that film class? There's some great like film.
Film Today.
Film Today, yeah.
I loved that class.
Do you
like,
remember who your teacher was?
Berenice.
Yeah, Berenice.
Yeah.
She's still there?
Yeah.
Oh yay! Oh, she was something. She was great. I remember she would show us a lot of films that, usually from lesser known countries, from more marginalized groups of people,
right.
More minority filmmakers, and obviously, as you can imagine, the subject matter of the film is pretty grim. And so at the end, you're super impacted, but at the same time, you're like, wow, that is so depressing. And I remember Berenice would, after every class, she would just see the room, and she would just say, like, well, this stuff happens. I was like, wow, thanks, Berenice.
There we are, kids.
Yeah. But anyway, so now that our listeners have an idea of what critical studies classes are, I wanted to read the course description for the critical studies class that Maija taught us, which was called Animation and Transgression. And the description is, back from 2007, This course will examine animation that, quote-unquote, breaks the rules and transgresses traditional boundaries of content, format, and framing. We will examine the rules animation traditionally follows, how specific films break or do not break those rules, and, in the contemporary artistic climate, whether there are any rules left to break. We will think of transgression as a philosophical approach, a narrative instrument, and a stylistic tool, all of which potentially redefine ways in which audiences connect with and understand animated films. Specifically, we will screen animation that features unorthodox narrative structures, explores taboo subject matters, like South Park or Family Guy, and depicts characters that turn inside out, undergoing metamorphic transformations such as Hole, Hangnail, the metamorphosis of Mr. Samsa. We will examine themes such as the uncanny and the grotesque as expressed in films by the brothers Quay, Jan Spankmeyer, and Los Angeles animator Lisa Yu. Lastly, we will look at notions of modernism and postmodernism and situate films that transgress the rules within a larger philosophical framework. I mean, that is a mouthful, but it's amazing.
That's awesome.
Isn't that awesome?
I don't think the students will really appreciate the value of such a class.
Yeah, I mean, when you're 17 and you just want to draw, like, I don't know, pretty fighter girls or whatever, yeah, like, getting this dumped on you, you're just like, what? But even if you don't,
right,
it does impact you.
yes, it stays with you.
Yeah, and I just want to mention, like, that term transgression, you know, as someone who had a Catholic upbringing, that term has always been coded so negatively. You know, if you think of forgive us our transgressions, right? But what I loved about this class was that it reframed that term in terms of a creative context for creatives in the art world. And no joke, when I go into meetings and stuff, I still use this word. I still use this word till this day when people ask me, like, what kind of films that you want to make. I say, I want to make animated films that transgress. So, yeah, I mean, first of all, thank you so much, Maija. I know that was really embarrassing for you and probably really hard for you to sit through. Thank you so much for bearing. But at the same time, like, yeah, I just love to hear your perspective on, like, why you want to teach this class and, like, do you feel like your students succeeded at all?
I feel a bit like what you described from Berenice showing you the film she showed you, that we would look at work and then I'd look back out at the students and everybody be like, eyes open, kind of scared.
Yeah.
Like, oh, God,
what did I just watch?
And I was saying to you earlier that I only taught it one semester because I felt it was a really tough subject matter in a way, and it was sort of and I wasn't sure how it landed with your classmates and with the students in the class. And now that I look at this description, I also see my younger self like trying to pack everything in so that Calarts would definitely allow me to teach the class.
Now you're the one making those decisions.
Now I'm like, no. But
yeah, now you're like, I see right through this.
can you add the word postmodern, please?
I love that word.
No, but it was, I actually, this is pre-YouTube, or it's just around the advent of
Yeah,
YouTube, and
it was certainly not, YouTube was certainly not something that we were using as frequently as we do now.
For sure. And I don't know if you ever saw me, but I would go to the Calarts Film Library and pull out all the DVDs and laser discs. Throwback. And I would sit there for a long time and just watch through, because I had the frame of reference for films that I had seen, but I wanted to expand that, and I wanted to find films that kind of fit into the ideas I was trying to sort of divide the class into, the weeks into, I guess. And so I would sit there and just watch a ton of DVDs and a ton of laser discs and
so would the
VHSs, and the students too, absolutely. And try to sort of figure out, just things that we wouldn't have seen as a group. Also to expand what our frame of reference was for films and filmmaking. And it's funny, even just seeing like Inside Out, I was like, wait, then they turned that into a movie, Pete Doctor.
My God, I didn't realize.
But
totally.
many years prior.
Yeah, it also reminds me a little bit of like Leo Matsuda's short film that was dealing with like the inside out and the body and the
inner workings, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, I sort of felt like I was, when I tend to think of creating courses, I try to think of content in terms of 3 different arcs within them, and so I was trying to think of style and the rules of animation, and then
perfect.
and then also just framing and content and stuff. So it was really fun actually putting together the syllabus, and I was really excited. And then as we went through the class, I realized like how heavy a lot of the topics were, and seeing films where people transform from it and pull their guts out, or that sort of stuff. I started to doubt myself a little bit. But I remember thinking, okay, well, there's things like the grotesque as far as content, or also how we might draw characters that are grotesque. But then there's also this sort of flip side, which is cute. And we looked at Hello Kitty and things that are sort of like so cute that maybe they become grotesque.
Right. Yeah. It's like a very fine line between like cute and grotesque.
Totally.
But I think as an artist, I feel like that's so important that you need to see everything. Like it's so important because when as someone that wants to be an artist, that's like you can't not. I think for your development as an artist, you have to see everything. Like you have to. That's the only way you really form your own identity, or your own taste in things. Like it needs to be really just take. You can't just look at cute things, or you can't just. You need someone that is like from a point of view that's has a little bit broader, and go, have you seen this? Have you seen that?
Just
like,
throw stuff at you that are brand new. And I feel like that's probably, in my opinion, the strongest pro when we're talking pros and cons of art school, is that you are just introduced to stuff that otherwise by yourself you would have never been introduced to. I mean, I even think of like, because I think you can definitely be an incredible successful artist and be happy and all of those things just by yourself too. Like I think there's tremendous value in that, and for some people that is definitely the most appropriate route. But think about like how easy it is when you're the one just doing your own artistic growth. You're going to probably pick the things that feel sweetest to you. Like it's almost like you have a growing kid, and what's that kid going to want to eat is just candy and sweet things and dessert, as opposed to, they need their veggies, they need their medicine, they need, and at a certain point when they become teenagers or something, they need to be introduced to like Indian food, or like sushi, or just different like French cuisine, because at first, if they've only eaten like hamburgers and fries and candy their entire life with sundaes, then they're going to be resistant to like, ooh, what is this weird saffron curry thing? But at the same time, if you are open to that and you let yourself expand out of that kind of box, then you actually discover a new side of yourself that was trapped in there that you never knew existed, and that's actually growth, right? It's
and we're in a creative field. It's part of like kind of, I mean, if you're always in a bubble and you're always watching the same or eating the same types of food or watching the same types of like films, it's almost like it's
you're strengthening the wall of that bubble.
Yeah, you're almost trapping your creativity. It's like part of it is kind of thinking a little bit outside of the box. And
part of it is like having someone there to see that and pull you in a direction that would be so unexpected to you. And I feel like that's what all of the critical studies, including this one, provided for me, and that's why I think it's the most memorable thing to me oftentimes were the critical studies classes. And also what's memorable to me is honestly all the heated debates that you get into with your fellow students. I think that's the other, and it's so funny because like at that time it's like I hated it. I hated being in that moment and stuff, but now it's like, wow, those were really agents of growth. Where it's like, when you get your artistic worldview challenged, or you have someone who's your friend who's so talented but thinks so completely different from you, that's really expansive, I think.
And I think that's what's great too, is that everyone's gets to do their own film in a way, and you kind of see, whoa, that I would never ever do that. And that's so different from me, and I think that's invaluable. Like that, and it makes you more open-minded. I think that's
the
a
most
big,
important thing.
really important to be open-minded to a lot of different things. And I just, for me, I just think it's impossible to be great as an artist and not have this open mind. At least to see everything to not. I think there was this quote where he's like, as an artist, you can't shift your focus away from what you're looking at. You need to. I think it was Corny. Corny said, I remember that from Corny. It was like, whether it's bad, whether you hate it, whether you love it, like you just gotta see everything, experience everything fully.
Wow, I love that. Wow, why didn't Corny ever tell me that?
I found out later. I was like, oh, he used to be a TA for Don Graham, and he's like wrote this book called Composing Pictures, and he's like this amazing teacher at Chenard, and he like pretty much like the reason why Bambi happened was because Don Graham came right after they did Snow White, and Walt Disney was like, oh, we got to upgrade our artists and really make them real artists. They got Don Graham, and you can kind of see in the film, like from Bambi and the film before, they just upgraded so much. And
it kept going on.
And it kept going on.
Just stop
right.
at Bambi. Like they were upgrade. Okay, now upgrade now. Upgrade now. Upgrade now.
And so
Until
we
got here. I'm just kidding. Yeah.
I mean, and Corny, I think I was like, oh, he was a TA for Don Graham, and then I found out about the whole history of Calarts and Chenard and really interesting stuff. But I was like, he's not saying any of that stuff. I gotta pull that out from him. So I take his class and go, hey, I read in this book like this section. What do you think about this? And then he would literally just.
You gotta pull it out.
Another crazy thing that he did was so like keys, animation keys. He would his whole thing was like, you know, there's an anticipation for an action, and then there's the result of that action. And so he was like looking at like fine art paintings and like doing master copies of those, and then doing the anticipation of that painting.
That's so crazy. Wow.
I remember that.
Wow.
And I was
We
like,
need to step up our game.
this is what you need to do. Like, you need to like break down these fine artists from the past and like do what you think is the anticipation of this. Wow. And then therefore you'll better understand what you're actually seeing. And I think it's like that actually stuck with me. I was like, I've just been thinking about it this way, and wow, there's this whole other area that I haven't been doing or haven't been thinking. And yeah, I mean that was pretty cool and great and invaluable.
For sure. Wow. So the other class that I also took that I think it would be fun to mention is sorry, what was this? Superheroes
Inside the Batcave.
Inside the Batcave.
I was trying to go like
Right.
Plato, superheroes.
Oh, wow.
That was my original, but then anyway.
Oh my gosh, I never do that. I'm learning so much today. I'm like catching up on all my past, like everything that I slacked off of. But you know what was also interesting to me, if I'm remembering correctly, that was at a time when the Marvel Cinematic Universe was just starting. Like if I'm remembering correctly, it was like right as the very first Iron Man movie was coming out.
That's right.
And you were teaching this like superhero class.
You're ahead of the curve.
I seriously.
One and only time.
Yeah, and now like looking, isn't it crazy to think about like, I mean that was like 10 years ago, but in that time the Marvel Cinematic Universe happened, and we just ended the first chapter.
Another thing with I've been thinking about this with art school specifically is the idea that it's not like, well, anybody that wants to go to this school can pay this amount of money and then you can get into the school and then you can graduate with a degree. It's not that. It's you have to do a portfolio and it's selective. And that's an important distinction, I think. Because it's saying that you're actually picked. You yourself are picked by the people that are teaching at the school they feel like you would be a right fit for what the school is trying to do. So like I'm sure you get like a ton of submissions and different portfolios, and in some ways we're living in a society, especially with social media, like nobody says, well, unless you're a complete asshole, like nobody says anything really bad on your art posts,
of course. Yeah.
And then we're living in this world of relativity. Like I can't say that like I like this or you like that, but I can't say it. But in that world of relativity, the teachers pick specific artists that resonates with them, and they feel like that person will be ready for Calarts. So are there things that, like, characteristic things that when you're looking at someone's work, of course, like it's not like a formula, but are there things that you look for that resonate with you, like?
For sure.
Or just like in broad terms, or like, do you have like a vision for kind of the type of student that you're looking for, just in like general terms?
For sure. Well, I'll start just by saying that it's really interesting at Calarts because the admissions process for undergraduate study is more similar to the graduate admissions process at other institutions.
Oh, really?
In the sense that for grad programs at other universities, the faculty will review the work and select the candidates that they want to admit into the program. But usually for undergrad, that doesn't happen, and in other colleges and universities. But at Calarts, it's all about, for the undergrads, like you were describing, Shiyoon, specific choices by the faculty for who to let in. So that's an amazing thing, and I think in my personal feeling about the whole admissions process is that it's a huge honor to see this work that people are putting forward. It is a very vulnerable position to be in, to submit your work, submit yourself, and hope to be accepted. So that is something we take very, very seriously, and we all,
I'd imagine so. Yeah.
It's in a sense a bit of a heavy weight because we want to do right by the
I
people who
imagine.
apply.
Yeah.
So the faculty look at the work, and as a group, what we're really looking for are people who we feel have the potential to become great artists, animators, and storytellers combined into the animation art form. So we don't necessarily need to see, full, beautiful animation in any type of application portfolio. So we also want to see an openness in terms of the creative approach that we're seeing as evidence in the application. So we want to see an openness to what the artist, what the applicant is observing and what they're translating onto the page. We want to see an openness about storytelling because we want to create, we want to mold students who have that openness when they are in our program as well as when they graduate and get out and create work. So we also want to see, people who are also going to, in a sense, honor tradition, but then also veer off into their own paths. So it's a lot to try to interpret from an application.
Seriously.
But, there's ways that we as we look at it, we can kind of get that sense from it. Also, of course, we want to make sure that students that we admit are proficient. They have to have really good drawing skills in order to come in, because that's not something that in our program is possible to teach right off the bat. People have to come in and hit the ground running type of thing. So they start 2D animation first day of school, or let's say second day of school. They're jumping right into life drawing, and so that has to be at the foundation of what they're doing. And then of course we don't ask for storyboards or anything like that. We say if you have any, feel free to include them, but we do want to see indications of someone who is a storyteller and someone who can build upon those skills to improve themselves and emerge, as someone who is going to create work that will be seen by a lot of different people. So those are the fundamental elements without getting too specific about what we're looking for.
Yeah, that's awesome. If you don't mind me asking, what's the gender demographic of that, and have you seen some kind of change? Because we talked about this in our last episode too, but there was that, I don't know if you saw, but that women in animation statistic that came out about industry ratios of based on gender, and just how bleak it is.
Extremely bleak.
And I wonder if there are clues to addressing that, at Calarts, and I'd be really curious what your perspective on that is, or if you have any perspective.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate the question. It's a really, really important question, and it is something we've put a lot of thought to. So our current sort of ratio is, or percentage, there's about 70%, or let's say 72% of our program that we can call female and gender non-conforming.
Oh, wow.
And then other rest are male.
Yeah. I think when I was going, it was right around half and half. What do you think, Jihan?
I felt like it
Less
was
than
the
half,
opposite.
really? Oh my gosh, I'm being optimistic.
60-40.
Wow.
But definitely 20 years ago. Also, sorry, among the male population, there's also gender non-conforming.
Of
so
course,
just
of
trying
course.
to
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, definitely have to mention that. Yeah.
For sure. But I think, let's say, over, big change over the last 10 years, but even more so from the last 20 years, where maybe there were 25% women and then 75% men. And even
That's
the first
crazy.
class had 2 women, and that's it, at Calarts. So it's a huge change, and it's an amazing change. And so we have partnered with Women in Animation, actually. Over the last few years, we offer free memberships to our students, to the organization, to, male, female, gender nonconforming students. Everyone is welcome. And our students go to their events. They go to mixers. They go to talks and screenings and that sort of thing. And so I'm really, really happy about that. And it really influences, I think, every aspect of our program, from our teaching, wanting to be sensitive to making sure to be inclusive with subject matter, with films that we show, content creators, filmmakers, animators, whose work that we refer to. And then, of course, it's incredibly interesting to see how that influences the films that the students make. And I think we're still understanding that it's a relatively recent shift. And so for me, I'm kind of in an observation mode, just trying to observe and see what is coming out of all of that. And but I think that is going to very much inform the industry. In fact, I think it already is.
Great.
From my perspective and my viewpoint. But I do think the industry has also to make sure that glass ceiling isn't, as firm as it is, and
doesn't stay broken.
Totally.
Like shatter it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there was even a symposium last year called Breaking the Glass Frame at USC that our colleagues there organized, which was an amazing a 2-day symposium.
So many glass ceilings to break.
So many. And
gender, race as well.
Yes.
I mean, I'd be really curious to hear about that as well, but yeah.
For sure. Well, we have a significant population of students who are from outside the U.S. who are in our program, from a whole variety of different countries. But I think we can do better in that regard, for sure. But I was going to say, it's incumbent on, I think, every artist and animator in the industry and exec to open the doors, and to have a listening ear, and to create opportunities. I think that's a fundamental thing. Yeah. And I think people are doing that. But I think it has to be even more so.
Yeah, and that was the other thing that I saw when I saw that statistic. What ran through my mind was like, this is so great that this data is out there and it's open to everyone. But there was a part of me that was almost a little afraid that people will just take this statistic in surface value and just start thinking of like, women or gender non-conforming people as just a number to hit, in terms of like, instead of actually reflecting their stories in animation, just being like, oh no, we're still making the same type of stories, but hey, see, look, on paper we have all the right numbers. Right. But it's like, when you look at the statistic, it's like, I think what also has to be reflected is like, the industry has to be able to more be willing to tell their stories as well. It's not just about hitting those numbers, but like actually being appreciative and encouraging, female or gender non-conforming voices too, because it's almost like this hidden thing, this hidden like taboo thing of like, we'll still make male-driven stories, which means, and there's that danger of like, we'll just get women artists who fit that male mold. Like, does that make sense? Like, and I think oftentimes, especially in the industry, there could be this like subtle discouragement for telling more like women-centric stories, where it's like, well, how are the boys like it, And I don't know, I just wish, my hope is that statistic doesn't just remain like materialistic surface data, but also like think about reflecting their stories as well, and encouraging and supporting that, because I do feel like, and I've heard this from a number of people who are female and friends who are creators, are like, they just feel that there's this other invisible wall of like, well, I have a lot of stories that I want to tell from my perspective, but I don't know if anyone wants to listen. You know?
Could you just tell me what kind of category they were?
Oh yeah.
Just
So Jian is asking us to actually go over the statistics. I don't have it with me. Sorry. But where can we find it?
Does it talk about the employees only, or does it talk about the creative content?
Also, creative leadership is
Creative
one of the
leadership,
things that I mentioned. So, like, we're talking about women directors, women writers, right?
Yes,
So people actually in like a higher position too.
Yeah, creative positions. Yeah, Dr. Stacy Smith from USC did a really wide-ranging study that I think got released this summer.
Yeah.
Or spring. But that focused more on women's, the number of women speaking roles in films.
Okay.
But I think it also looked at the numbers of statistics of directors who are women. And that sort of thing. So I think there's that. And I think, obviously women in animation has the goal of being 50-50 by 2025.
Yeah.
Within of women and
Fingers
gender
crossed, you
nonconforming
guys.
folks in creative roles though.
Yeah. So in order for our listeners who might not be familiar with the statistics, I think in order to find it, where would you have to go? Like because I remember seeing it in the Women in Animation Twitter page. That's where I saw it. And I also saw it being shared on Facebook, but I wonder.
They have their own website.
They have
can
their
you
own
see
website.
it on their website?
Women in Animation, the Gina Davis Institute has a lot of great information, and then Dr. Stacy Smith from USC, just Googling her name and coming up with her, or finding her PDF, it will be great, I think.
I think what's also great with Calarts is that, before we were talking with Carrie and there should be more workshop type classes. Because in the system that is the path to go to be a
creative
director
leadership in animation is often based on time merit, right? So it's like the longer you've stayed in the industry, that's when you get the promotion, as opposed to so people who are what the industry considers raw talent, right? Just so talented, but with almost no experience, they're going to have to go through the line.
Yeah.
And that can take, up to 20, 30 years. And it's like, so if you're just looking back at the timeline, well, what was the industry like back in 20 years? It was mostly men. Right. So if you're just following through that factory line, then of course it's going to be just men being promoted to director or creative leadership roles one after another. And we were just talking about when Carrie was on, how the industry should really rethink that system,
And with the school, I think it gives you these other ways to, because part of it is practicing with those the different types of the pipeline. Because if you just work your way up as a story artist, there's more to being a director than just the storyboard art part of it. There's the editing part. There's working with actors. Yeah. There's the script writing part. There's there's all these little other parts of the
animators,
pipeline.
Developing the look, visual development,
and with those film workshop classes, I was like, it's.
Oh yes, so we were mentioning, I think it was you, how helpful it would be to kind of counteract that system, if there could be some kind of institute or some kind of program where, for all the younger women or gender nonconforming people, if they wanted to kind of gain that time-earned knowledge, maybe they could maybe some kind of director workshop for younger animation women or gender nonconforming people could be really helpful too, because they have stuff like that for live action, so we were just talking about how great it would be if there were more opportunities like that for animation. And I do feel like Women in Animation is doing such a great job with that, really taking charge of that, because I do see that they have mentorship programs, which is so great. Excellent. And so many top-notch creators in the industry are being mentors, and so that's really great too. So just want to give that praise and encourage that more. And I just want students to know that that's out there and participate in that, I guess. And like conversations like this, I feel like is what, because okay, we're jumping back and jumping all over the place a little bit in terms of topics, but it's like one of the things that I do want to kind of mention is like sometimes you see online or on Twitter a little bit like people saying, and I get it, with Twitter it's like you can't have this more nuanced, complex, elaborate, fair, balanced type of argument, but sometimes on Twitter you just see these tweets that are saying like, yeah, don't go to art school, just go take this class at like this academy for like $200, like $400 or something, and you'll get the exact same benefits as you'll get from art school. And I'm like, I see your point, and I definitely think those type of classes or those type of things can be very, for the right person, it'll be the right path for sure. Like, because there's no one size fits all to education. Everyone kind of has to find their own. Are you okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Find their own path. But I guess what bugs me about statements like that is just like the general blanketing of like, no, everyone's gonna get exactly the same value. And it's like all the things that I talked about, especially like pushing what school does in terms of like, and we're not just talking about Calarts, we're just talking about like art school in general, where they have these kind of like programs that push you out of your comfort zone, pull you into a new direction, expand your horizon, introduce you to things that you never thought existed. So one of the things that I was wondering about, like just talking about this, and I remember even some of my friends who were students at the time struggled with this a little bit too, is like I imagine having so many opinionated faculty members surrounded by so many opinionated students, I imagine it could be easy to kind of be also confused a little bit and lost in your way in the context of like, you know, this teacher is telling you this and that teacher is telling you that. And of course, there always seemed to be students who were so sure of themselves and had that confidence and assurance of being like, this is what I want to do. But not everybody's like that, you know, and there are students who were like, I'm just trying to soak up all as much as I can, but you know, sometimes it's overload, and sometimes like, what's my style? Like, who should I listen to? So do you think that's a reality at Calarts?
Yeah, it's definitely a reality at Calarts. You know, it's really tough to be surrounded by so many amazing artists and so many incredible teachers, and a lot of teachers who come directly from the industry after work to come up and teach at night. And so, you know, as a student, both in art school but outside of art school too, one will get a lot of opinions on one's work.
Of course.
One will get a lot of feedback on one's work.
Every class you're getting critiques from
class.
Your friends, your peers, your classmates. I mean, I guess those are all the same thing, but your teacher as well.
Yeah. In a sense, part of being in any type of school is learning to curate the feedback that one gets as far as what one accepts and what one believes and what one takes to heart. Because not every bit of feedback is going to be relevant for each individual student's goals and each individual student's wishes and their artistic pursuits. So I think it's a matter of curating the feedback that one gets to sort of decide what really is the most important thing here, and what can I even realistically apply to my work. Because if you start applying all the feedback to your work, then your work starts to get really kind of jumbled.
It's just going to be a mess.
It's a mess, and it's not going to reflect your viewpoint, and ultimately you want your work to reflect your viewpoint.
Of course. No, this is just like great advice for just artists in general, not just like student at Calarts, just like, people out there trying to learn animation. And because we get that question a lot, right? Like, when should I develop my style? How important is it having a style? And
right. I mean, I feel like that you kind of touched on like just like shifting through all the feedback and really asking yourself, well, what's the most important one here? And I feel like that, I think that's an important skill set that you just continuously need to be asking yourself, because you're putting yourself out there, and then a million people are going to be
just piling up their opinions right on top of your art. Yeah.
And you need to find in that zone of like, well, what's the most important feedback for me for right now?
Yeah.
And I feel like that's so much a part of being an artist, is to shift through that and to just like to be able to find the right feedback and to apply it in a healthy way, because sometimes in so many ways it's so stressful. And it could become unhealthy. I mean, there's so many terrible things that you can just kind of get confused or just even give up just give up
Yeah.
drawing and art and
Totally.
Yeah, and I feel like I also want to add that like you should also remain flexible too, because I don't know if you remember, Shun, but when we did the so a few months ago we actually did a test run of the podcast, unbeknownst to anyone. I think we told you, Maija, that
Right.
it was like we're kind of thinking of doing a podcast,
Right.
but we don't know if we're gonna be good. And thankfully Maija was so welcoming, and so we did a Q&A guest lecture at Calarts, and one of the topics that popped up there is like, how important is it that I know exactly what I want to do by the end of graduation or by the end of the school experience? And you know, I think that's one thing that I notice with a lot of young fresh students is like they feel this pressure, like I have to find my style right now that I'm going to stick with for the rest of my life, and this style is what I'm going to be known for. Is like, and some people that works great, and some people that's absolutely the right path. But I'm speaking of me here, but also a lot of other people. It's like you just never know how you're gonna change. You don't know how much you're gonna evolve as an artist, and you're in a certain season right now. You're 17, you're 18, 20. These are the things that are important to you, but you just never know what life's gonna throw at you. And when you are like 35, you might suddenly find yourself exploring a completely new side of you artistically. And so I guess my point is like, you don't have to feel that immense pressure to just immediately right off the bat know what your style is, because it's all a process, and we're constantly growing and evolving and, you know, changing. So
For sure. I think because the way school is structured, it's, you know, this set of 4 years, and you hope that at the end you're going to be this perfectly formed artist that can then emerge into the world.
Almost never happens.
Never happens, yeah. Be the perfect artist in a studio or something. But, you know, it's not going to happen. And I think the most important thing is gaining practice at one's work, gaining a sense of persistence and not giving up.
yeah,
You know, if there is a setback, or if someone does critique your work and you feel really bad about it, it's learning to overcome that and not give up on what you want to do. Because
Yeah.
if you give up, then you're certainly not going to do it. So you
Yeah.
have to keep going with it.
Yeah.
And so luckily, a place like Calarts, but college in general, I think one of the big things one learns is just how to keep going and how to filter things. And I think it takes a lot of practice to actually filter feedback. You can't just be perfect at it right away. Or like one can't be perfect at a job right away either. So you have to sort of practice going through receiving the feedback and mulling it over and deciding what to use and what not to use, and then making a mistake and then coming back. And, you know, mistakes
Yeah.
are so important.
100%.
You know?
Yeah. Make those mistakes.
Make
Don't
those
be afraid.
mistakes.
And yeah, it sounds like, you know, also kind of always being able to self-reflect on like, oh, am I not aligned with what I really want to do, what feels exciting to me in my gut? You know, I think that those kind of self-reflection tools always help, of like just checking yourself. Oh, am I being pulled in a direction that I don't like? And always coming back to those questions like, what's really important to me though?
Yeah.
What do I really want to do? What's going to really satisfy my soul as an artist, I think.
And I like that the school doesn't give you a GPA.
Yes.
Like I feel like part of I mean, what I don't like about just looking back at my own education is the GPA kind of system of everyone fitting into a certain mode of a multiple choice kind of a situation.
Yeah, that's so old.
And I feel like, you know, I think it should be totally okay that certain people, like, that you can that you're not really graded by like A, B, C, D, or F, but it's more about what you're learning from that one assignment to be able to even sit with the same assignment and to get as much as you can from it. And I think the important thing, that's what I realized just from high school and then just going to Calarts. It was just like, well, nobody's going to give a damn about if you got like an A in this class.
I know.
Is like what you really learn. Like,
Yeah.
did you really learn something? And you're actually paying for it too.
Yeah.
So like it behooves you to really know, like, to take the time to really like learn something.
Yeah, and know that you're paying for your happiness.
Right.
You know? That actually reminds me, I know, didn't you have like a video of like Jules Angle when we were preparing material for this interview? One of the things that I really liked was that video that you sent of Jules Engel
So
talking about
yeah.
teaching. Can you first of all, can you explain to our listeners maybe who Jules Engel was in the context of CalArts?
Jules Engels was, I think, one of the first teachers that actually taught at CalArts. That was a big
kind of defining voice.
Defining voice of the animation school. I think he might have been the head of the animation school when the school first started, when it was first built in Valencia.
I am learning so much new information about CalArts. This is like a CalArts history class for me.
And he also worked on Fantasia. He did that sequence with the little
mushrooms.
The mushrooms,
yeah.
The ballet sequence. He also worked on UPA as he did Gerald McBoing as a colorist. And so I feel like I almost feel like when I think about CalArts, a lot of it is shaped by him and his philosophy. Like to me, he's kind of like an iconoclast of the school.
An icon and an iconoclast.
Yeah. But one of the things
that was
really,
tacky.
So he has a bunch of YouTube videos about his whole career and also his time at CalArts too. And there's an interesting section in these videos where he talks about teaching and his whole philosophy of teaching and he really didn't like the word teaching. He actually thought.
Wait, is this a video that everyone can search on YouTube?
Yes, we'll have it in our link section.
Oh.
We'll put it in our description.
Cool.
I get inspired by it. And what was key about it was that he had a hard time saying that he was really teaching the students. To him, it was more about sharing. Like, to share, like, at a certain point, like, you're teaching, maybe, like, teaching, but then at a certain point, you just need to just see it. Like, he kept pushing that. Like, okay, it's good to see movies, but you have to go to the theater. Like, he kept saying you have to go to the ballet. You have to see it, experience it, and, like, that's, as an artist, you really need to do that. Go out and experience these things and just, like, you know, be affected by it in a personal way. And I almost feel like some ways, like, teaching... there's a way of teaching where it's just by rote or like you're seeing it through a specific person's lens. And what I thought was great with Jules was it was about sharing. It's like you need to have your own experience of the work for yourself. Were you able to watch those videos?
I did.
So I mean, what was your like? How do you feel about?
I mean, I wish I had a chance to meet him. I never got to, but no, it's really special, and I think it's at the heart of the very unique pedagogy that CalArts has and that I hope it continues having over time. You know, it's a very different approach to education. Thinking of, you know, teaching as sharing, just that is such a turn, you know, from the tradition. But also at the core of CalArts is the idea that the teachers and the students are colleagues. Colleagues in art making, colleagues, you know, and will be future colleagues working together, which does happen, you know, and I think that dovetails into the video, into what you're talking about. And I think those are really special aspects that we don't get a chance to experience in other types of college contexts, and that's one thing that really makes CalArts unique. But I think it's something that actively has to be worked upon and has to be maintained. We can't take anything like that for granted. We have to watch these videos. We have to have these discussions to keep that alive, you know. So.
So one of the other things that we wanted to kind of touch upon a little bit is, you know, for a lot of people, the tuition of CalArts becomes like a very prohibiting factor. And I think that's why we get a lot of these questions of like, a lot of the questions that we do get is like, CalArts sounds great. CalArts sounds wonderful, and I'm glad you guys had that experience. And it sounds like, you know, rainbows and unicorns. But, you know, for someone like me who just can't afford it, or it's just not a realistic path for me, how do I navigate that? And it's like, I feel like that's definitely becoming like a topic. And I mean, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts, although it's like a little bit unfair because I know you have no control over that, you know? It's like, but I'm just so curious, like, yeah, that must be like something that you grapple with sometimes as, you know, someone whose heart just goes out to all these youngins.
It's true. it's really true. Yeah, it's very hard to see any students struggling, but it does happen and happens frequently. Yeah, it's as a Canadian where education does not cost as much as it does in the United States. It really boggles my mind.
Nudge.
Yeah. Nudge, yeah. Lots of other
Canada
things
also
like
has
that
a
too.
great art funding,
system.
like the National Film Board of Canada. Nudge,
NFT.
nudge.
Shout out to Michael Fukushima, wonderful executive producer there. Yeah, no, it really boggles my mind about the cost of education. I think it's something that the country as a whole has to kind of get under control, and I really hope that that's going to happen in the years to come.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. And I think that it is, in a sense, the burden is being transferred to students to carry, that financial load. And I worry that our students won't be able to buy homes, buy cars, pay rent, buy food. Buy homes in the future, not while they're in school, but
change
in
the student
future.
loan.
Yes, they'll be saddled with so much debt that it's just they won't be able to follow any sort of path that their parents may have followed or that sort of thing. So it's a really tough situation, and Calarts is not unique. The art schools across the U.S. are definitely on par as far as the cost, but it is devastating to see, when students are going through financial troubles and really trying to make ends meet, and especially if they have to drop out because of financial reasons. So, I applaud different things that have been done out there. For example, when Bloomberg gave money to Johns Hopkins, I think it was $1.8 billion, and exclusively for financial aid for students.
Really?
Which is an amazing thing. Also, the founders of
that's incredible.
Yeah, founders of Home Depot gave enough money to NYU so that medical students there do not have to pay tuition.
Wow.
And I hope that the same thing can happen within the arts realm, whether at Calarts or at other art schools.
Yeah.
I hope that people will be philanthropic in the same way, because we need artists just as much as we need doctors.
Yes, especially America.
Especially America. And, so it's really important. And so, so Calarts it can be prohibitive for some. We do have students who come for a year and get, get that year's education and then get out there and do great out in the industry after that. But of course, we want students to have a bachelor's degree and to gain the full experience and be able to make, every student makes a film every year, so make their full 4 films. So it's really tough. So I think it's, the burden in a sense is not only on, let's say, the government, but it's also on, the people out there who can be in a place to help. And I really encourage and hope that people will be able to.
I have a question about, is there a different way do you get support from the government as a private school too? Is it different than like a state university where they're getting a huge funding from state and government?
So the question that Shiyoon was asking was, just like state universities do get some sort of governmental assistance or governmental funding, does Calarts, which is a private university, get those type of assistance as well?
It's a very good question. I'm not totally sure. Our financial aid folks would definitely know, but I know that our students from the U.S. can receive federal aid. So I believe Calarts does qualify for some forms of aid, but I bet it's not quite the same as with the state school. And, there are foundations out there that are really stepping up to also help out students who are in a variety of different educational contexts. And I think that's, excellent, like large companies that are creating foundations within those companies that are philanthropic. But I was going to say also that, it as everyone knows, you can go to school for animation, but you don't necessarily have to have gone to school to do animation. And there's a lot, I think especially now in the digital age, there are so many opportunities to learn, so many, different avenues for education that are
so many options
online.
Yeah.
And I think the key thing is that if someone is, not in a position to go to an art school or study animation in a formal context like that, is to develop a plan, like to really kind of, in the same way that you have a 4-year degree and you have different stages that you're sort of going through from an educational standpoint, if you create a sort of structure for yourself and a plan, you say, okay, I'm going to do all of Khan Academy here, or, everything relating to animation. I'm going to do these tutorials here. I'm going to go on YouTube here, and I'm going to set myself the following goals, and maybe even have a friend be help to keep one accountable and sort of create one's own educational plan like that. I think that's a great idea. And then the other key thing is, one of the most special things about Calarts is the community. especially the community of students and the classmates. All of you are in school together, and it's amazing that you're still, such great friends and working together and doing great things together.
Still all tolerating each other.
A decade later. And so that's a really special aspect, and that's one of the coolest parts of just sort of witnessing our students come together, become friends, work together in school, work together outside of school. So if one isn't able to go to an art school or study animation, I think it's really important to try to develop avenues for developing that community outside.
Yeah.
And luckily there are, we have all of our online resources to be able to do that, but to be very active about it, because it doesn't just happen automatically. One has to really seek it out. And maybe one creates one's own group that is a group of people studying, or, that sort of thing. One can be really creative with how one does it.
Also, one of the things that I did want to mention is, like, I think our podcast, we can certainly explore those avenues in the future episodes as well. Like, we really want to give all these different options of what leads to, like, a career in animation.
Yeah, because there's, I mean, when I was going to school, there wasn't that many, and now
No, not at all.
And I feel like there's a lot of different options for people out there, and there's so many people from different parts of the world that, like, it's like it's their dream. They see the movies and they see it as their career path, and I feel like even more so now that to get that type of education, it could be more accessible. Yeah,
and we started with Calarts, like this whole, I guess, informal, like, animation education or path to animation series with Calarts, because that was our experience, so we're most familiar with it. But we do want to give the deserved time to all the other options as well. So definitely stay tuned for that, and always open to our listeners' suggestions, ideas, comments as well too. So, but thank you so much, Maija, for spending this gloomy, beautiful, rainy Los Angeles afternoon with us.
So much fun.
Do you have anything to promote or anything to plug or anything to put out there? I guess the producer show, maybe.
Yeah, well, I did want to give a shout out to my, our students. Our students, our alumni, it's a huge group. No, but especially our current students, and also our faculty and staff, because we have a big group of people that
just wonderful.
Do a huge amount of work every single year to sort of make everything work. And so I just want to give a shout out to all of them, and so that they know how appreciated they are.
Can't wait to see the exciting things that you guys do. But thanks so much. And with that train sound in the background, bye guys.
Bye.
Send us emails. 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 Send us